And then it looked at me, and I raised my spear gun at it just to be safe. Like, not that my little 90 centimeter gun's going to do anything to this great white shark, but, it feels better with a pointy object between you and the shark.
Hey everyone, John Stenstrom here from the Cast and Spear podcast, and today we have Ernie Gorham from California Fishing News. If you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, definitely type it in. It's great. He covers all of California fishing, does kind of like a recap, and then gives you a fish report, which is awesome. I use it all the time. He also has a podcast and a website. Today in this podcast, we cover his project, we cover sport boat fishing, party boat fishing, we cover fly fishing, and a whole bunch of other stuff. He's kind of like a jack of all trades, which is really cool because I feel like we really resonated in that aspect of things. And we also covered how he does some spearfishing, and crazy. If you listen to halfway through the podcast, he'll tell you about his close encounter he had last week with a pretty big shark. Before we jump into the podcast, I'd want to say thank you to Mikey Stack, who said, super helpful info for the beginner and experienced fishermen alike. Good gear tips. Thank you, Mikey. Appreciate that. If you haven't already done so, please leave a comment and a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. It really helps spread the word about this podcast, and I read every single one of them. So if you have any feedback, please let me know. But without further ado, please welcome Ernie. All right, Ernie, welcome to the podcast, my friend. I hear
Thanks,
you're in
dude.
London.
I am. I'm coming at you from London, the UK.
Wow, which part of the actual city are you in? Are you near any rivers or?
Yeah, I live right on the Thames pretty much here, or that's where, because my girlfriend's here, she has an apartment here for a year. So it's right on the Thames. They do some like carp fishing in the Thames, but I've mainly just been doing fly fishing here. One thing I'll say, it's a lot different. So in the US, basically all of the wildlife is owned by the people. It's pretty cool. Like, even if a deer's on your property, you don't own it. If a fish is in your river, you don't own that fish. And here, it's like the old style where you have to get permission pretty much to fish anywhere. So even if, like, I can't go fish the river without, like, joining a club that has permission to fish the river. Or people have, like, rights to this section. Like, this 200 yards, this guy owns, and so I have to pay him to fish it. So it makes you really appreciative of what we have in the States. Even though people like to complain that it costs $8 to fish at some of our lakes. We really do have it pretty well.
Wow, I had no idea. Have you reached out to any of the like YouTubers that are out there in the UK doing some crazy carp fishing?
I haven't, dude. I have carp fished once before, but I don't have a lot of stuff here. I brought like a travel fly rod because that's easy to bring, but I don't have, they use gnarly carp gear here. Like, they have these pole holders that have the sound that beeps when they go off, and you have to have a huge net and these landing pads. And I mean, I've seen them at the park sometimes, and I'll talk to them a little bit, but I haven't tried to, really go carp fishing here.
There's no better way to piss off a person from the UK than to show them how we fish for carp in the States, or kill a carp. That's like blasphemous. I went to Thailand, and my buddy that was there, that I met from the UK, I showed him some of the pictures, and he was just like, "How dare you? Carp are treated like royalty," and I'm just like, "Carp are treated like crap." in the United States.
Dude, it's so funny, and maybe we'll get into this, but fishing has become a little bit elitist or a little snooty, where it's like, oh, I only fish for largemouth, or I'm a calico guy. And then if you're fishing for perch or something else, they kind of look down at you. And it just goes to show it's so cultural. It's like, here they fish for carp, and that's a huge deal. And it's a trash fish in the States no one really cares about. So it goes to show it's very cultural, situational.
100%. I just learned that in Eastern Europe, they eat carp, and it's great. Like, they love it.
Yeah, it's like a Polish Christmas tradition to eat carp.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
So, Ernie, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into fishing? And I want to talk about your project about the California Fishing News.
All right. Well, like most fishermen, I owe it all to my dad. I got 3 older brothers, and he would take all of us fishing. I'm the only one that it really stuck with, though. But we never had a boat, so we would surf fish in the summer, and then we would trout fish at the local San Diego lakes in the winter, Lake Wolford, Lake Dixon, because I was from North County. And then growing up, in college, I started fishing again. In high school, I kind of stopped. We'd still surf fish every summer, but, in high school, you're more concerned with girls and partying and other things than fishing. And then in college, I found out we had a fishing team that fished the FLW college bass tournaments. So I joined that. We were able to fish a year. That was awesome. I suck, but we learned a lot, and we made it to nationals, where we just got our absolute butts kicked. It was in South Carolina. But it taught me a lot. And then my fishing partner from that is also from Carlsbad. So when I moved back home, he introduced me to like the sport boat fishing down here, which I had never done. So I caught my first yellowtail in a half day, and I couldn't believe how my arms hurt. I was like, I've never had a fish do that to me, where like my arm literally felt limp after catching this thing. And that really got me hooked on the California sport boat stuff.
Well, how big was that yellow?
It was like 20, 21, 22 pounds. It's still the biggest yellow I've ever caught, actually.
They're quite the fighters, man. That first run is insane.
Yeah, and this was actually on a half day at a Seaforth, and we were yo-yoing for him in like 200 feet of water. So I got bit in like 180 feet, and yeah, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I went with 3 of my buddies, and I was the only one to catch one that day out of the 4 of us. So it was very serendipitous. I got lucky, and maybe better off I didn't catch one because I would be thousands of dollars richer today, but such is life.
The money pit of fishing gear, man. I never thought I was a hoarder until I started looking at my garage over the last like year. And I'm like, I got to stop. I got a problem.
It's true. I mean, my mom gives my dad crap because it's funny. My dad likes to trout fish now, mainly. That's his deal. He goes up to the Sierras every year. But specifically, he likes trolling, and he's trying to target these big browns. But now he's got multiple Shimano Stellas for trout fishing. These are like $500 or $600 reels for trout. We make fun of him. It's like no one needs a $600 reel to go trout fishing, but he's old and retired and he likes his nice things and he buys them on eBay, so he doesn't pay full price for them or anything. But yeah,
it's not a bad reel though.
No, it's super nice. I'm spoiled because I get to use this stuff. So,
where does he catch the big browns? Because I've done a lot of fly fishing in the Eastern Sierras, but I've never really gone trolling for them. Where does he like to go?
There's 2 lakes called Twin Lakes. There's Upper Twin and Lower Twin. Lower Twin used to have the California state record brown, and it was like 20-something pounds. And then it was caught in like the 80s, I believe. And now Upper Twin has it, also caught in the 80s, and it's like a 26-pound brown. So I'm not sure they still have these 20-plus pound browns in them, but they do have really big brown trout in those 2 lakes. They're big lakes. They're deep. Yeah, that's where he goes mainly.
All right, I guess I got to try that next time. I guess I won't find that from the shore, though. I'm probably have to get a nice little trout trolling setup.
You can float tube them or kayak them. The thing with catching those big browns, it's like they troll like 7-inch like pointer little jerk baits or palas. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, though, you want to do it at like the earliest in the season, the latest in the season. Like November when it's starting to snow and the weather's the worst. That's when they say the best time is to catch those big browns. But he's been going up there for years, and we've never actually caught one of the big browns. We just like to target them. But mainly we catch rainbows, and there's some landlocked kokanee in there as well. So get some of those. Do
you like to eat those trout, or always catch and release?
No, I eat trout. I don't eat all of them by any means, but I like to backpack too. And when we backpack, we always keep 1 or 2 for the frying pan. The stalkers, I have mixed feelings about. I mean, I don't mind eating them, but it's really you're just eating a fish that was fed pellets its whole life, so it's not like eating a wild stuff. And they vary greatly, I think, in taste, depending on which hatchery produced them and what they're feeding them. This year, the local San Diego lakes have been getting them from Mount Lassen, and they've got a really nice red pink meat, and everyone's been really stoked on how they taste. I haven't eaten any this year, but yeah, no, I definitely eat trout. I'm not purely catch and release by any means.
Do you have a favorite? Do you like rainbow or brookies or?
No, dude, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I'll catch shit for this, but I think bluefin and yellowfin don't taste that different because they're eating the same stuff. And I think those trout don't taste that different. Like they're feeding the same diets, or they're eating, pretty much the exact same diets. And I think they taste mainly the same, personally. Maybe my palate just isn't developed enough.
It's not as refined. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
I know I definitely can tell a little bit of a difference between the stalkers at the, really stocked lakes out of the Eastern Sierras. But then if you go up, say, to Merced Lake or something in Yosemite where you have to actually hike back there for a little bit. I can, at least I want to tell myself I think they taste a little bit better, but it's probably all mental biases where I had to walk 12 miles to go get it. So, of course.
You're hungrier.
Yeah.
No, it depends. It's like here in the UK too, it depends on how long they spend in there because it can be a stocked fish, but after 4 months, if it's in the lake for 4 months, it's been on a natural diet for those 4 months and that'll change its meat. And then it also depends on the water quality. Like growing up, we'd fish at Cuyamaca a lot, which is in the San Diego mountains. And they are the only lake in San Diego that's able to stock trout year round because of their elevation. But me and my dad always said that they don't taste good during the summer. The water's warm, and he always thought they tasted muddy. So I think it depends. If it's really cool, clean water, they generally taste better than if it's warm, dirtier water.
Interesting. So I found you. I think Coach from the SD Fish forums mentioned that he was on your show once, and then that's how I found the project that you're working on. How long have you been on an SD Fish?
I mean, years, but like anything, I got first registered for Bloody Decks, I think, in 2008, and then didn't go on it for like 10 years after that or something, or, some amount of years after that. So I think I was on SD Fish many years ago, but I went up to school at Sonoma State and I wasn't really active. And then it was just coming back down to San Diego. So the past couple of years, but like anything, I'll be more active at certain times on the forums than other times I don't post that much.
Do you still use Bloody Decks? I haven't really familiarized myself with that. Is there like a difference between the cultures between the two forums? Or?
Oh, for sure. No, I mean, I love Bloody Decks. I got a lot of respect for it, and I've gotten a lot of rides from it, and I've learned a lot. But Bloody Decks, people are more dicks, honestly, on the forums. Like, SD Fish has got a really nice community. People are cool and helpful, and there's a little bit of that in Bloody Decks, but you have to wade through a lot of, someone will make a post, and then there's just personal drama battles on it where this guy hates this guy, and they'll have a 10-page post just tearing each other up, and it's kind of silly, but there are still definitely gems to be found in Bloody Decks, and there's a few posters that post really good, valuable stuff and are really cool. So as part of the California fishing news, it's like I got to look at everything. So there's definitely still some good stuff to see on Bloody Decks, but I definitely prefer the community of SD Fish.
I got to check out Bloody Decks. I got to see what you're talking about. That sounds like a little bit of drama.
Yeah,
but
silly.
Going into your project, because I think what you're doing is amazing and much needed. I know, 976 Tuna, they kind of been doing something a little bit similar where they give you the reports over the days from the various boat captains, but I like how you're kind of taking a broad approach, seeing what everybody's catching during the week and then kind of giving them some kudos and then also some advice on, what's popping right now. So can you talk a little bit about your California Fishing News project?
Yeah, so it all started because I spent a lot of time on my computer. I was working from home or working on the internet, so I would always just be scanning all of the sites. I love 976. I love Bloody Decks. Sorry, Ali or Jason, if you listen to this, but I used to read my buddy's fish dope all the time, even when I couldn't fish, just because I love learning about, they're talking about it's on this color break or on this or that. So I would kind of always be in the know about what was happening. And my buddies would always ask, like buddies who love to fish but don't spend hours online. Good for them. They have more of a life. But they'd always ask me what's going on. And so I could always send them the report and where to go and this and that. And then I figured if they really like this, then I'm sure other anglers would too. So I started it last year, I think in September. And basically I try to do it weekly, though sometimes it's bi-weekly. And I talk about, like you said, whatever's been caught that week, where I'll take a look at temp break. I'll take a look at the weather forecast. I'll talk about reports on Bloody Decks, the counts on 976. The idea is there's a ton of information for free on the internet between the Facebook groups and the forums and different sites, but it takes hours to scan through it all. So basically I'm doing all of that work for my listeners and then putting it in one place. And the episodes are usually 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how much I got to talk about. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's huge. Have you ever thought about doing like an email newsletter as well, like to complement your video and podcast?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot more I could do with it. And I was recently writing articles for a poker website, just like part-time. But I learned about search engine optimization, SEO, through them. And basically it's huge for SEO to have a lot of content produced often. So ideally, I think with every episode I release podcast, I should also have, like a newsletter or just an article or a blog post, whatever you want to call it, in text version form as well. So it's something I should start doing in the future. It's a work in progress, and I'm not making any money off it. It's part-time. It's just, like a passion project. So there's definitely more I could do with it. But yeah.
Hey, SEO, that's kind of been my background for the last couple of years. You're definitely right about that. The more content, the better if it's targeted. And it's just hard, man. Like the amount of content to compete with some of these other people who do it like professionally, it's brutal. It's a brutal game, but it would definitely be helpful. So what is the recommended, if you had to recommend, like, I'm a new guy, I maybe don't use a lot of fishing apps, but I want to kind of better myself with all the different reports. What do you recommend to kind of whet my palate to know that fishing is going to be good, hot, what I should be thinking about?
It really depends on what kind of fishing you're into. There's a couple of really good Facebook groups if you like to surf fish. Other thing too is there's people that fish that are like have very little money, and then there's millionaires with yachts who fish, and everybody in between. It's such a wide spectrum of like financials. So if you're someone who like has very little money, wants to get into fishing, I would say get on Facebook, join a group called West Coast Surf Fishing. Or also there's the group California Surf Anglers that Benji Kim, who you interviewed, is like one of the admins for. Both of those are great. Tons of good resources if you like to surf fish. If you're in the northern half of the state, in Northern California, there's NorCalFishReports.com. You have to take that one with a grain of salt because basically every report from guide is an advertisement for that guide, so they're going to be a little bit biased. But you just got to learn to read through that. And then if you're into like any of the sport boats, half-day boats, on up to the 3 or 4-day boats, obviously 976 is a great place to start for that. And I know you had Terrence on here as well.
Do you have any recommendations regarding, the different weather or those kinds of things that you like to use?
I use Temp Break a lot. Temp Break shows the sea surface temps and chlorophyll offshore. I got into that from spearfishing because the chlorophyll relates to visibility really well. When it's blue on there, that's going to be really clean water, and when it's green, it's dirtier water. For weather, any weather app kind of works for the lakes and stuff. Just check the local weather listing, or there's NOAA releases their offshore weather report. I forget the website, but if you Google like SoCal offshore weather NOAA, they have a really good one that I check, and they break it up between 30 and 60 miles offshore and 0 to 30 miles offshore, because sometimes just because it's beautiful 10 miles out, when you get out past like or towards San Clemente Island, it gets way rougher out there. It has to do with the shape of California. Like there's the bight where it comes down and makes that big turn in around Santa Barbara, and a lot of the storms come from the north. So the inner part of that gets blocked off and has a lot better weather than the outer part of it, basically.
Oh, that makes sense. So going into you mentioned you spearfish and on the party boats and you fly fish. You sound like you're a guy who's like a jack of all trades. Is that helpful, or is it better to niche down?
See, I think it's whatever you're into, really. It's like we fish mainly to have fun. I think it's a great pastime. It's good for you to get out there and enjoy nature. And I just kind of do whatever's available for me. It's like since I've been spending time in London, I've been fly fishing because that's the easiest thing for me to do here. When I'm home, I surf fish all summer because I love going to the beach and spending time there. The party boats, though, are just the next level of addiction because there is something about when you get into like a wide open tuna bite, there's just nothing quite like it. It's a drug and it's super addicting. So that might be my favorite, but no, and you can definitely take a lesson you learn from each of them and apply it to the other styles. So I think it's beneficial to do it all, but I'm never going to be as good as the guys who specialize. If you're only do this and that's all you do, like of course you're going to be a lot better at that, but it's just not my style.
I hear you. I feel I'm very similar to you in that I just can't pick. I just like to catch fish, period. And it doesn't really matter which tool I use. But going into the party boats, do you have any tips from all the years that you've been doing it? Like any observations, techniques that you recommend, maybe gear?
Obviously listen to the crew, but the biggest thing is you got to just get rid of your ego. A lot of guys, men have egos, especially when you're adults. And my biggest strength, I think, has been able to like let that go, because I've had trips where I'll never forget this trip. I was on the Tribute and it was an overnight and it was early season fishing for yellowfin in Mexican waters. And there was a lot of yellowfin there, but they just weren't sticking to the boat. It's like we'd pull up on a school, we'd throw chum, 1 or 2 guys would hook up, and then the school would leave. And I remember like I couldn't get bit. And after 4 stops, this one guy had 4 fish. And the next stop, I just stood next to him. And I was like, dude, I'm just not leaving your side. Like, I'm going to figure out what you're doing. And I still didn't catch a fish that day. I think we had 22 anglers and 20 people caught a fish, and I was one of the 2 that didn't. But I learned it's like in that certain situation, it was really important that you were one of the first ones in the water. So he was ready by the bait tank, had his hook in his hand. As soon as you start slowing down, you're ready to bait up. You don't want to like push people out of the way, but it's like sometimes it makes a huge difference being one of the first ones in the water.
Oh, interesting. Do you often go to Mexico? Do you like it down there more? Or?
I do. I'd love to spend more time in Baja. I did one trip years ago where we went down south of Bay of LA and we brought 3 kayaks down, and it was like a 15-hour drive for the last 4 hours on a dirt road. But we camped on the beach. We speared a whole bunch of cabrilla. My buddy shot a 42-pound yellowtail in the first 10 minutes of the dive, but that was the only yellowtail of the trip. But I wish I could spend more time down there. Yeah, it was, man, I took the photo. It's one of the favorite photos I've taken. He's, shout out to Daniel Burke. He's a really good spear fisherman and diver. But he's not like the big dude. He's kind of short, and he holds his fish, and it just looks like a monster. It was awesome.
That's a lot of muscle to be pulling on your spear gun. That's intense. We should go, man. We should head down to Baja this season. I plan to go at least almost once a month. So even if it's just a surf fish or spear or whatever, it'd be great.
Dude, absolutely.
To go.
I need to spend more time down there. It's always been on my list, but you know how life is, and it gets caught up, and your budget gets spent other places and this and that. But no, Baja is one of still a little treasure down there. So
it's kind of hard to imagine just how. I know a lot of people have been going down there for years, and me talking about it means nothing just because there's going to be a lot of guys who say, oh, of course, duh. But it's like, it's still a hidden gem, man. Even today, 2020, it's like, whoa, there's nobody for miles around. There's little villages. It's, outside of Ensenada, there's really not a lot. So it's really cool. If you haven't already been out there, guys, you gotta go.
And we all hear my uncles and my parents, they all used to caravan down there and camp on the beach and just surf and, buy lobsters from the guy. And they all think it's dangerous now. But, as long as you're smart, I don't think it's really dangerous. I used to work at a restaurant in Encinitas, and one of the girl bartenders there, she lives in Baja Malibu, and she commutes up to the States to work a few days a week, and then she drives back down. And I mean, she's like a young girl and has never had any safety issues. So I think as long as you're smart about it, it's generally fairly safe.
Absolutely. So talk a little bit about your spearfishing experience.
I'm definitely not a pro by any means, but when I went to Sonoma State, my buddy liked to scuba dive, and he did a little bit of free diving, and he invited me to go abalone diving one time because I wanted to go. I just like getting in the water, and I thought that sounded like the coolest thing. So I go with him. There's three of us, and we go out to this place called Russian Gulch, way up by Mendocino. And the viz was terrible, like less than 5 feet. It was a little rough, and I did not get a single abalone. And I'm wearing like 2 surf suits stacked on top of each other because I don't have a freediving suit yet. But I still really liked it. Like, it was just such an adventure. So we went back, and it sucks that abalone diving's closed now, but it was fairly easy to get your limit. It was 3 abalone that had to be 7 inches, and pretty much every time we went, we could get our 3. They weren't like 10 inches or 9-inch plus. Like, those are the 10 inches are like a trophy abalone. I never got one of those, but it was pretty easy to get your limit of 7 inches. So then I went down to San Diego, and I, started with a pole spear. I was lucky when I started. There were some days of really good viz, and dude, I went out there and I like shot opali and stuff, like, sargo. Like, I didn't care at all, but I just love being in the water and diving. So that got me started. And then I found there's the dive club, North County Depth Finders, that are located in North County, San Diego. And it started off just a group of like 10 guys, a bunch of us weirdos. It was not any real good spearfishermen, like a couple good ones and a bunch of just kind of kooks. But we met on the forums, and we would do group dives, and it was a blast, the community and learning. And one guy, Jason Zenor, is actually a captain of the Pride, sport fishing boat out of Seaforth. And he took me in his little aluminum skiff one time, and I speared my first yellowtail in the kelp. It was this little, like, 3-pound thing, but I was stoked as a La Jolla. Yeah, I shot a yellowtail. I was amped. And then I started going offshore with a guy in that boat, or in that club, and he showed me about what paddy hopping is. Or you just spend hours looking for them, then you find them, and sometimes they're loaded with fish, and sometimes they're empty. And I speared a few more yellows out there, and I just love it. Freediving it's a ton of fun, and it's really kind of psychedelic being in the water. The way things move, and you can travel 3 dimensions. You go down, up, side to side. It's almost like flying, but in the water. So I just love it.
Have you ever seen a white or any other kind of shark?
Yes. If anyone's listening, check out my most recent California fishing news. But I'll tell the story again here. It was the 28th of February, a couple weeks ago, and I got invited offshore with my buddies. And we go cruising looking for patties. We find a few patties. Nobody's home. We see a few things, and ends up just being dolphins, and we're just scanning all day. We brought a big tuna gun and like float and line everything, hoping to get a bluefin. We knew it was like a long shot, but there was some tuna showing up in February, so you never know. And then we see what looks like the peck fin of a whale like splashing around, and we're really confused. We pull up on it, and it ends up being these 2 thresher sharks. Just like, they must have been doing something involving mating, because it seemed like they were flirting. But they ended up swimming around the boat, and it was really cool. I got some eyed in it, but Nathan Minata, you guys can look him up on Instagram. He's got a really good underwater camera and drone, and he posts really cool stuff. He got some awesome photos of them. But But anyways, after that, we went up and anchored up off of Oceanside, off of Camp Pendleton. And we anchored up in like 30 feet of water and dived the spot for an hour. And it's like 15 to 20 feet viz at the top. And then the bottom 10 feet has this murk layer where it's like 5 feet of viz. And we're just doing dives down. We're doing one up, one down with one guy up watching the other guy. But no one shot anything at that spot. I like saw one legal calico that I missed in the bad viz, but that was it. And so we're debating if we go home or not. And we're like, well, let's just pull over to this other part of the reef and give it another like half hour and then we'll go. So we go anchor up on like 20 feet of water. We're doing dives. It's nice structure down there, but again, there's Garibaldi and bait, but there's no real game fish, a bunch of short sheep's head. So we're about to get out, and there's the boat anchored up. My buddy Nate Wells, he makes spear guns, Wells Spear Guns on Instagram. Shout out Nate. He's to the right of the boat, just like a few feet off of it, and I'm maybe 10 feet right of him. And we're sitting there looking at each other like, yeah, I think it's time to throw in the towel. And this guy in the boat goes, shark, shark, and points in front of the boat. And my instinct was like, no, this guy's messing with us because we've seen like 3 sharks today. Like, there's no way a shark. But we both look up, and around the front of the boat swims a little great white. And it was only like 6 feet long. It was a juvenile. And the viz was good enough 6 up top. Dude, I mean...
It's still big, man.
I don't want to pretend like I'm really brave or anything, but this instance wasn't that scary just because we had a warning. Like, if I turned around and that thing was there, I for sure would have shat my wetsuit. But we had a warning, and we looked, and the viz was good enough where we saw it, and it just swims around the boat, looks at my buddy Nate right in the face, and then it just looked away from him, and it looked at me, and you could tell from the body language, like, it wasn't aggressive. It was just curious. And then it looked at me, and I raised my spear gun at it just to be safe. Like, not that my little 90-centimeter gun's going to do anything to this great white shark, but, you know, it feels better with the pointy object between you and the shark. But I've got this image, like, instilled in my mind of just its face. And it's got, like, scars on its chin, and it's white on the bottom. And it's about the size of, like, a girl's basketball, like, bigger than a volleyball, but smaller than a men's basketball. And it just looked at me from, like, 10 feet away, and we made eye contact, I swear. And then it just turned to the left and kept cruising by. And we both just, I mean, I was only 15 feet from the boat, but we booked it to the boat. And I looked over my shoulder one time and just could still see it like 20 feet away, just slowly swimming off. And yeah, that was it.
Tell me you got this thing on GoPro.
Dude, there's no footage. There's no photos. I know Nate dives with the GoPro too, but his died. And Nathan, who we're with, has an underwater camera and drone, like I said, but we were about to go in, so he was already out of his wetsuit and had his stuff packed up. So, yeah, no proof except for Nate. You guys can ask Nate Wells. It happened. We saw it, and it was a really cool experience, honestly. Like, I thought if I saw a great white, I would be terrified. And just because of the nature of how this one went down, it actually wasn't that scary, and it was really cool.
Does this give you any second thoughts about getting in the water again?
No, dude, I'm still going to spear. I mean, there's something, especially in bad viz. Like, I remember one time I was kicking out on a shore dive out to the kelp when it was maybe like 10 feet of viz. And once you get in like 20, 30 feet of water and you can only see 10 feet, like, it gets really creepy. And those thoughts definitely like start to slip into your mind. But it's just like a mental toughness thing. You just got to take a deep breath and be like, look, it's fine. Whatever. My chances of getting, like, I'm much more likely to die in a car crash than from a great white. So, I mean, sometimes it creeps into your head, but I'm still going to dive when I can.
I'm in the same camp, man. Sometimes, especially when I go lobster diving at night, I've been out on PV once where it was maybe 5 feet of viz. Maybe. It was more like miso soup, especially when the flashlight is like reflecting off all the particles. And you just have to kind of give yourself to the ocean. Otherwise, there's no point to be there. Because if you're scared, you know, you're going to have your heart rate going out of your chest, and all the fish are going to realize that you don't feel comfortable there, so they're going to get all spooked and stuff like that. So it's just a mental challenge.
Yeah, you just got to take a deep breath and be like, hey, because I'm not someone who panics very easily by any means, but you can see those like anxious thoughts creep into your head really quick, and you just got to take a deep breath and, you know, be logical about it and be like, look, you're fine, relax. And yeah, normally I just get over it pretty quick.
Now, did you learn, like, self-teach yourself spearfishing, or did you take one of those FII courses or any of that stuff?
I did. I took a FII a number of years ago. I used to spearfish a lot more than I have the past few years. I still have a couple spear guns. I've got one, a Wong spear gun made by Daryl Wong out in Hawaii, and they're like beautiful guns. And Now I have a couple wetsuits and stuff. I still keep all my stuff and I'll go occasionally, but years ago when I spearfished more, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I took the FII level 1 with Brandon Gross. He, I think, moved to Colorado, so he doesn't teach them around San Diego anymore. But it was awesome. I would definitely recommend it to any diver, just for the safety aspect. They teach you how to hold someone else out of the water if they do experience shallow water blockout, talk about the warning signs, teach you about how it's like your urge to breathe is not a lack of oxygen, it's really buildup of CO2, and you just learn about all of it, and it makes you a safer diver. And honestly, they make almost everyone in the class. Before that, I think my longest time I'd hold my breath was like maybe 2 minutes. And that first day in class, I hit like 247 static. And pretty much everyone in the class hit 3 minutes or really close to it. So it's definitely worth it if you dive at all.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing that this weekend. I kind of need to get that out of the way. My goal would be to eventually hit triple digits if possible. I would love to just at least once get down to 100 feet. I just think that's a milestone marker for myself. Not that it's like even great compared to what other people can do, but I think that would be fun. I know that class will help.
Totally. They take you to 20 meters, 66 feet with a line. And and I think, I'm not a good I'm a novice spear fisherman and diver for sure, free diver. I'm not here to say like I'm very good by any means. But there was one day at Cat when you first start diving and you're not warmed up, for a lot of people, myself including, you can't dive very deep, like your dive reflex hasn't kicked in and you're short of breath, and you might only dive 20 feet the first dive and maybe 25 feet the second dive. But as you relax in the water, your mammalian dive reflex kicks in, your heart rate goes down. And there's one day at Catalina when I was working this like really kind of steep ledge, and I started punching some dives that had to be like 60, 70 feet, and really comfortably too, like not freaking out or pushing it. It was just, it was awesome. Really good viz that day, and it was a beautiful experience.
How in the past were you finding like your dive buddies? Because this is something that I've been kind of, unless you're in a club, but even if you're in a club, it's hard to mesh schedules, right? It's kind of hard, especially if you want to be safe. Like a lot of the old guys would be like, before the safety thing was a big deal, like, oh, just go out there and get your time in and all this stuff. But if you want to be safe and have a buddy, it's just kind of hard to schedule, man. Like, do you have any tips around that?
No, join a club and get on the forums. I haven't been active in spearing forums in a number of years, but obviously Spearboard was the big one for a long time, and that kind of turned into a little bit of a shit show. And Chris Oak and some of the other good divers started spearing forum, and that, as far as I know, still is a really nice community. So I would say if you're into spearfishing, check out spearingforum.com, become a member there, and then join one of your local clubs. There's San Diego Freedivers, the Neptunes, OC Spiros, North County Depth Finders, and even in Northern California, when I was up there, there's the NorCal Underwater Hunters. So there's definitely a club around you somewhere.
That's awesome. So let's pivot into some of this fly fishing talk. So you're telling me, or just trout fishing in general, you're telling me your dad was going out to the lakes, going after those big browns. Do you have any experience catching any of those big ones out in the Eastern Sierras?
Dude, I've never caught one of the big browns that exist. I've seen them, though. Between Upper and Lower Twin, it's out of Bridgeport. There's like a creek that flows there, and in the fall, the brown trout do kind of what the salmon do, where they swim up the creek to lay their eggs and to mate. And it was a low water year, but they close it off to fishing, which is pretty cool. But you can go and stand on this bridge and watch them. And there was a number of these like 5-pound browns swimming up, and it was awesome. But do you know who Kevin Matson is?
I don't.
You should check out his Instagram. He's a San Diego fisherman, just like a badass. He catches a lot of fish. He caught a marlin in his bass boat, and but he's been recently going out to Arkansas and fishing swim baits for brown trout, like 6-inch, 7-inch glide baits, like big largemouth style swim baits for browns. And that gave me the idea. If I make it up with my dad this fall, I'm going to bring some of the like rainbow trout imitation swim baits and try those, because trout kind of get a bad rep, but you have to realize in nature, like, they're predators. They eat little minnows, they'll eat frogs, they'll eat little mice, they eat whatever they can. And if you're talking about a big brown, like, they're eating 5-6-inch fish normally. So don't think you have to use a little tiny Castmaster or anything to catch trout. Like, you can definitely use a bigger lure sometimes.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even think about it like that. I'm so inundated with the fly, like doing it that pure way. You know what I mean? Like, haven't really done a lot of lure fishing for trout, but I should try that if I want the big boys.
Even here in the UK, my past couple months where I've been fly fishing here, I've been using like an intermediate sinking line, and then most of my success has come on snakes or minkies as they call them, but they're like 2-3 inch basically piece of mink fur tied on a hook, and you're basically imitating a little minnow or tadpole or something like that.
Have you done a lot of traveling? I know you mentioned that you've been down to Mexico, but have you done, and in the UK, I guess, but have you done anything else outside, like trying to find fish abroad?
I went to Thailand as well, and I went to one of the fishing parks out there, Pilot 111, and that was rad. I have a couple travel rods, so I bring them pretty much wherever I go. I went to Costa Rica with my buddy. We didn't have very much luck, but we went fishing there. I've been to Puerto Rico. That was sweet, actually, because we just walked out to these rocks, and like second cast, I caught a needlefish, and then I could start seeing these needlefish like cruising, chasing after it, and I cast after them, and all of a sudden I could see like a 3-foot barracuda come in, and it bit me off instantly. I only had like 20-pound leader on, but it had to be like a solid like 30+ inch barracuda, and it just bit me right off. That was sweet. Puerto Rico, I think, is a little hidden gem, and they need it right now with the hurricane and the earthquake. 80% of their population left the island, and so much of them rely on tourism that's not really happening much. So if anyone's looking for a vacation, I know on the West Coast here, we mainly go to Mexico and places like that, but I would definitely recommend Puerto Rico, and you don't even need a passport. So. Oh,
that's awesome. You said Thailand. What did you catch in Thailand?
Mainly barramundi.
Okay.
It was sweet. It's a fishing park, so there's like 6 or 8 ponds set up, but one, it was like 90+ degrees every day, and two, they get a ton of pressure, so it was not easy fishing by any means. I fished the whole afternoon with all my normal stuff that I thought, I would, rattle traps and bass lures, and I never even got a bite. And then I met this nice Canadian dude there, and he looked at my tackle box, and he's like, dude, put on this. And it was a big working class zero citizen swim bait, like a 7-inch swim bait. And I threw that, and that's when I got my first bite. And I ended up losing like 5 or 6 fish before I actually landed one. But it was awesome. And I've got a photo of that one on my Instagram. And it was just a proper, I don't know how much it weighed, but it was a really nice barramundi. That was rad.
When you say they would break off, they were just like coming off the hook, or did they do something weird that you had to account for? A couple through the swim bait. I think a lot of that was my user error, because the way the Citizen is, it's designed to be pretty much weedless. So you're using like it's like an extra wide gap hook, where it sits pretty much flush with the bait. So when the fish takes it, Mike Gilbert, who makes them, has got videos about it on YouTube, but you can't just it's not like fishing a jig style hook where as soon as they bite, you set the hook. It's like when they bite, you need to wait, reel down, let the rod load up, and then really like hammer the fish to get the hook point in. And as an amateur, I wasn't really doing that. And then barramundi also they don't have teeth, but they've got a very sharp, it's called operculum. It's like their gill plate basically. And what they do is they go in and they slash at the bait. And I had a couple just cut me off because I didn't bring I would have brought like 40 or 50 pound fluorocarbon next time I go. But I was fishing like 20-pound mono, just what I had on my travel stuff. And they just, cut me off. So. Oh man, that's a unique little way it's kind of like a billfish using their bill to weaken the prey. It's kind of neat that they use a gill plate. That's pretty. What is your gear of choice? Because it's like, I'm trying to get back onto the boats. I grew up, going on the half days a lot, and 3/4 days with my uncle and my dad. But I never really gone out for the 1 day, 2 day thing, and I wanted to start doing that more. So what do you recommend I bring?
It all really depends on your budget. If you're rolling in the dough, then get some Shimano Talicas and get the nicest stuff. I'm going to be honest, dude. Shout out to my buddy Adrian, because he's been doing the sport boat thing his whole life, and so is his dad and brother. And pretty much every trip I go on, he lets me borrow stuff, because I've got an Avid, and I've got a couple of sticks, and I've got like a Torium. All these reels are like hand-me-down or used, or like stuff I found around. I haven't bought a brand new reel. But if you were going to buy one, the Penn Fathom is supposed to be really good, and it's really affordable. There's Accurate's really expensive. Shimano's really expensive, but they're good. Okuma makes good stuff people like. But there's a reel store I go to, Kent's Custom Reels in Oceanside, and I talk to them about it, and they just swear by the pens, and they're inside all those reels, fixing them all the time. So if I'm thinking about buying one, but I'd get like the Penn Fathom. Probably like a 40 is a good size that you can just do anything with, and still probably catch a 100-pound tuna on it. It's not quite the right stuff for that, but you can still make it happen.
That's what I've been hearing too, man. Those Penn Fathom 2s are just workhorses for $200.
Yeah, they've got a
Crazy.
really good reputation. And for rods, like you don't need much. I mean, I've got like Okuma MXRs. You know, rods are like $100. I mean, of course, the United Composite stuff, and you can get a Phoenix, and I mean, the other stuff's really nice too. But I don't know. I would save the money on expensive gear, and I'd rather go on another trip or two. But you know, to each their own. Some people like having the top of the line stuff, so it's all depends.
No, more time on water is always better. What do you like to do line-wise? Do you straight mono, or do you do braid backing? I know it's all different. This is kind of arbitrary questions, but
No, dude, I think it makes a really big difference sometimes. I have by far the most confidence in braid to straight fluoro with no mono. I know a lot of guys really believe in the mono for the shock absorption. But it depends. I also prefer, it's not the cheapest way to go, but if it's up to me, I'll use it's kind of long range style where they use like 25 feet of fluorocarbon. Because fluorocarbon, even though it doesn't stretch like mono does, it actually still has a little bit of stretch. So if you're only using a 4-foot piece, it might not have very much stretch. But if you're using a 25-foot piece, it's still got a little bit of stretch to absorb like the head shakes and stuff. And I think that the bait acts better in the water without it. Mono floats, so that's putting a little bit of drag on the bait. And it's all about getting your bait to look natural, and that's how you get bit. So personally, I will do braid to straight fluorocarbon. I have caught fish with mono to a little fluorocarbon leader. That definitely works too, and sometimes it may work better. And I've had captains tell me, like, Mark O is the captain of the Pacific Voyager, like legend in the fleet. And on one trip, he's like telling us, he's like, guys, like, use fluorocarbon. If you only use the braid to or use mono, like the braid to fluorocarbon, you're going to lose fish. But a bunch of us didn't do that, and we all still handled it. So maybe if you're brand new, you want to have a little mono in there, and it can help out. But personally, I'm a braid to fluoro guy.
what's your favorite knot between braid and fluoro?
I tie like the RP or Tony Pena or whatever it's called. It's got a bunch of different names, modified Albright knot. But my buddies tied the uni to uni forever, and I know like true purists swear that the uni is not that good, but he's caught plenty of fish on it, and it seems to hold pretty well. And then I pretty much tie San Diego Jam for a terminal knot, but Palomar works great too. So Palomar's super easy to learn, and that'll definitely catch you plenty of fish.
Yeah, I think if you can just tie the knot perfect, it's going to be better than tying a janky, better knot, stronger knot.
Absolutely. And then while we're on that topic, if I had one tip, again, not that I'm a pro, but on a number of trips when it's like it's been picky, there was always like a couple of guys on the boat that could just get bit, like almost at will, you know? And I just would go up to them and talk to them. And the main thing that seemed to be in common is a lot of them are doing the shoulder hook. It's like pretty much everyone starts off nose hooking, and then the butt hook's really good too because it makes the bait swim down and you can feel it really well. But I swear by the shoulder hook. And there was one trip on the Aztec last summer when the first day there was a lot of fish around, but they were being really picky. And I think the boat caught 52 fish the first day. It was like 35 bluefin and 17 yellowfin. And I caught 9 of them. And I swear it was from the shoulder hook. And there was a trip I did on the O95 when we were anchored at San Clemente, and there were sea lions on us. And so the sea lions were taking a lot of the baits. Like a lot of the anglers were, recreational and not all that good. And they'd drop in their sardine, and the sea lion would just run up and grab the sardine. And I was butt hooking it, and I dropped it in, and I saw the sea lion swim up to my bait, and at the last second, he turned his head and swam away. And I think it's like last second he saw that hook there, and he turned away, and that gave my bait just enough time to like shoot off to the bottom where the sea lions wouldn't bother him. So on that trip on the Aztec, I was butt hooking it, and 2 casts in a row, I felt my bait get super spooked. And like you can tell when you spend enough time fly lining sardines, like you can tell what's going on there. And I felt my bait get super spooked where I'm 100% expecting just to get bit. And both times it didn't get bit. And something just clicked in my head, and I was like, dude, that maybe it's just like they're doing what that sea lion did, where they rush up to the bait, and then last second, just something's off to them, and they're turning away and they're not eating it. So I shoulder hooked it, and next cast I caught a fish. Next cast I hooked one and pulled the hook, and next cast I caught a fish, and that was like, well, no one else on the boat got bit. So right then it like proved the point in my head where, not that it works every time, but the shoulder hook is definitely something you should learn and put in your repertoire.
So where would I be hooking? Is that in front of the dorsal fin? Like right behind the head kind of thing, or?
Yeah, just behind the head. It does take a little bit of practice to do it, especially with circle hooks, because, I mean, it's the easiest to nose hook. Like they have a little nostril. It's just super easy to pick it up and throw it through the nose. But just practice it a little bit and use a J hook if you can't do it with a circle hook, or just when you're driving around on those offshore trips, you drive around for hours looking for fish. Just practice it. Just pick it up and do it a bunch of times, and ask the deckhand to show you how to do it. And a lot of times the captains will tell you like butt hook, butt hook, butt hook, because it is generally better than nose hooking a lot of the time. But they also don't say shoulder hook because most people don't know how to do it. And there's a lot of times, if you talk to deckhands or captains or the best anglers on the boat, they're going to be shoulder hooking more often than not.
I had no idea. What size circle hook do you like the best generally?
I'm a really big fan of tiny hooks just because, I mean, with tuna fishing, it depends. When they go stupid, wide open, it doesn't matter. But I'm actually a fan of little small J hooks when they get picky. I still fish J hooks like a circle hook. I don't set the hook. They pick it up. I throw it in gear, keep the rod pointed down at the water, and they'll set it themselves. And probably about half the time, it still ends up right in the corner of their mouth because it isn't a circle hook, but it still just slides to the corner and then catches. And yeah, so I don't even know that maybe size 2, size 4, like really small J hooks were working last year when they were picky. Or like a size 1 circle hook. If you just could only bring one, probably size 1 circle hook would be totally fine. But I'm a fan of really small hooks. And you can still keep your line heavy, still fish 30 or 40 pound test if you're in the mix of the grade with big bluefin or something, bigger bluefin, let's say. But yeah, I'm a fan of the small J hooks.
Do you ever use surface irons or any jigs?
Yeah, I mean, my first bluefin I ever caught was on a Colt Sniper, and I'm a big fan of the Colt Sniper. But I mean, I can't cast a surface iron like the really good anglers can. I'm not even going to sit here and pretend I can. I can't. Like you see the deckhands or some of those guys that are real salty, they can huck a surface iron like a mile. I can't throw it that far. I've caught a couple yellows on the surface iron at the Coronados, and I've caught actually a bunch of calicos on a surface iron at La Jolla one day. And I've caught like a couple fish on popper here or there, but I'm not a great caster. Like if I really want to catch a fish, then I'm usually backfly lining baits.
That's something that I think I wish there was more resources on, just to have. I guess I'm wrong. I guess there's like the Long Beach Casting Club, and there's a couple different casting clubs, but a lot of times the casting clubs are for fly fishing. I would love to see some good old saltwater, like, I know that in the East Coast they do a lot of surf casting, and they teach a lot of that, but I wish there was something more local here on the West Coast to kind of show how to get those surface irons way out there on the boat.
And that is one time that I would probably spool up if I was going to have a specific surface iron reel. Either A, spend money and get like a Tranks that has a level wind and it's a bait caster, not like a conventional reel, and they're just much easier to cast, especially coming from like a bass fishing background. Or B, if you're going to do conventional, then I would probably spool it up with straight like 40-pound mono, because mono I think is a little more forgiving to cast. And then also just like go to the park and practice. I saw a post actually recently on Facebook of a guy caught a largemouth on a surface iron because he just went to the park to practice casting. And, largemouth will eat pretty much anything if they're in the mood. So it's something I need to do, honestly. I need to take the stick that I use to throw, and I should go to the park and practice more, because it's something I should definitely be better at.
Yeah, when I was at the Fred Hall show, I finally purchased like a new reel for the first time in a long time, and they were all recommending that Daiwa Alexa 400. I think I got the Win, the cheaper model, but they all like the HD, and they were saying the same thing. It's like, get yourself a good low profile bait caster and then crank down on those magnets so that you don't overspool, and it'll just make your life a lot easier. So I need to go test it out.
Yeah, and I think that the Tranks is probably slightly better than Alexa, but there was a specific one I remember on Bloody Decks a couple years ago where a guy caught like an 80-pound bluefin, I think, on Alexa. Like, I mean, they're bait casters, but you can definitely still hammer pretty big fish on them. So it might not be ideal, and you might have to get it repaired or serviced more often or more frequently. But yeah, I think you can catch big fish on the bait casters.
Absolutely. So what other topics would you like to chat about, man?
I saw something you posted about the OC Spiros I thought was interesting about them talking about eating, what's it called? Opali.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool because we get a little bit in our elitist moods, where they're like, oh, you're eating that? Like, and you're like, oh no, I only eat tuna, or like, oh, I don't even like tuna, I only eat my Dorado or this or that. But I think in reality, more fish than we think of are really good to eat. And it's really good to take pressure off those certain fish because, I mean, obviously as fishermen, if we want to fish and have our kids fish and everybody fish for the foreseeable future, like we need to practice a little bit of conservation. And if we can take some pressure off the tuna and the yellowtail and eat some of these other random fish, they can be really good. And I mean, like bonito's got a really bad rap. Bonito can be delicious. Skipjack, I had skipjack poke on a trip. It was phenomenal. They're both kind of soft. You have to take care of them, and you can either smoke them or do them raw, but they're both really, really good. And then in the surf, it's like, yeah, you can eat perch, you can eat croaker, you can eat corbina. Like all of those fish are good to eat, and they're not commercially harvested, so their populations are doing better. So I think it's good to not be super elitist about what you eat.
I think a lot of it comes down to education. And this is something that I was kind of thinking about before the OC guys were doing the opali thing, and we just kind of meshed. It was aligned. We did it at the same time. But I loved what they were doing to kind of, like, opali is always looked at as a trash fish. Then they show you how to do sashimi, and there's a lot of different cultures who look at opali as like a really good fish to eat. Especially in like the Japanese culture, they just know how to prepare it right, I think, and it's just kind of more commonplace to eat smaller fish. And that's now I have in my fridge when I'm about to make some videos on it are some of the fish that I'm taking, because I think diversity of your plate should be a thing that we talk about. So it's along the lines of what you were just saying. It's like white perch, black perch, opali, XYZ. If you can figure out methods in which it's easy for the everyday person to take a couple home, prepare it in a way that doesn't make it taste crappy, then of course people are going to want to do it. I think a lot of people just default to, tuna is generally going to taste great. Like a white sea bass is generally going to taste great. There's just certain fish that you don't have to do much to, and they'll just taste amazing. But if we can just kind of show that the other ones, maybe you dry age it for a couple of days, or maybe you do a different process, and then all of a sudden it tastes amazing. Like for example, that one video I put out about the sheephead, I've had sheephead ceviche, I've had sheephead day of, cut it up, putting it in the fridge for 5 days and letting it like kind of dehydrate a little bit, then fry it up was great. It was like tasted way better. And these are things that other people are probably doing in their kitchens all the time, but nobody's like sharing it. So the new guys aren't going to know about it. I don't know. Something like that. I agree with you 100% on the diversity.
Absolutely. Sheepshead's delicious. I've only speared a couple of nice sheepshead in my life. But I remember I made crab cakes out of it. There's a recipe, I got it from Bloody Decks, where you basically take your favorite crab cake recipe and you just substitute sheepshead meat instead, and they were absolutely phenomenal.
They call it a poor man's lobster.
Yeah.
And rightfully so.
That.
And
then
good.
Sorry, I thought about two other things I wanted to bring up here. One, in the realm of sports boats, there's like this culture where you want to get your limit, right? Like, oh yeah, I got my limit. Like if you didn't get your limit, you're not a good fisherman. If you got your limit, you're a good fisherman. And I think that's a little detrimental too, because honestly, like if you're catching big, let's say they're 20 to 30 pound yellowfin or whatever, you better have a lot of friends. If you're in U.S. waters, let's say you can keep 10 of those a day, or even 5 in Mexican waters, you need to have a lot of friends to give that away fresh. Or I just hate the fact that I'm sure a lot of this fish is wasted. And I'm not pretending like I'm a saint. Like that's where I learned is I remember in November 2016 or 17, the big bluefin went off at the 60-mile bank. Like it was straight 140, 150 pounders. And I took 2 home and I got them professionally processed. And I mean, I ate as much as I could and I gave away as much as I could. But I remember like 2 years later, there's still some in my freezer that got freezer burned. I ended up just like having to toss it. And I felt such guilt about it. And I'm sure with the amount of fish some people take home on wide open trips, like some of it's getting wasted. So I think just be smart about it, and it's okay to release these fish. Like sometimes the sport boats don't like to do it because they want to put it in their count or whatever, but if you get it up, like have the deckhand just cut your hook off, and it's okay. You don't have to take your limit home every time, and just be responsible with your resource, because I mean, I know they're just a fish, but at the end of the day, like you're killing a living thing to eat, and if you're going to waste it and you're killing it just to waste it, like, I mean, that's just super disrespectful to the fish and to the whole like fishing community. So I'd like people to be a little more aware of that and either make sure you're giving like a ton away to your friends or just not letting it go to waste.
That's huge, man. I think, it's crazy because you've heard of the like tragedy of the commons, right?
Yeah.
It's, to me, I always come back to this, and I don't have to get political or any of that stuff, but, between the commercial fishermen, who have to live and they have to catch what they can. And then, you're paying for a boat trip and you want to catch as much as you can there as well. It's just like, I don't know, it's hard to explain to get people to see the long-term view, I guess what I'm trying to say. So I think you're 100% right in terms of, it's just hard because you pay all that money to catch a tuna on a 3-day or 2-day, and you're like, cut the hook. It's like, oh, come on.
No, and I get it's super hard to stop fishing, and like, I don't want to ever stop, but consider looking around. If you're catching more than other people, hand it off, or make sure like ask anyone else, like, hey, does anyone need this fish? And you can still keep it, or ask the crew if they want to keep one or something, or otherwise, yeah, just let it go. The most fun part about offshore fishing for sure is when you get that bite. Like when that line starts flying off your reel at 50 miles an hour, like there's just nothing else really like it. So that's the most fun part. So if I can, or if there's ever a kid on the boat or something, like when you get bit, put it in gear, hook that fish, and then look around and see if anyone else wants to take that fish. Because the bite's the best part. And really, it's like even now I've got tuna here, and my parents' freezer is like full of tuna. Like I only went on 2 trips last year, but they were both really good trips, and I still have to work to give it away. So it's something like I said, I'm not perfect. I still let a little bit go to waste here and there, but it's something I'm trying myself to be better at, and I wish the community would also just work a little harder on.
Outside of giving it away to friends, have you looked into some of those kind of newer clubs that are like sharing wild game and wild meat? Have you seen any of those things happening?
No, I have. I've thought about that. Like there should be a community just for bartering this stuff. And I have traded tuna for deer a couple times, just people that I met. But I haven't heard of those clubs. It sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, there's one that I think is in Costa Mesa or Irvine. They're called Windward Westward. So they're kind of trying to push that whole narrative. I think it should be way bigger. I think everybody who fishes, if you are going to catch it and take it home, then do exactly what you're saying, right? It's like, it's probably going to be a little bit easier if you give it away and somebody gives you some other wild meat that you just become more sustainable in terms of your local catches instead of buying, farm raised fish or buying fish that was caught commercially in other parts of the world. Do you have any reservations on like buying fish, like from the store?
I honestly try to almost never buy fish from the store. Just because I have a freezer full of tuna pretty much all year. I will go to sushi, like, a couple times a year we go to sushi with my buddies or with my girlfriend, but I really try not to I never buy fish at the grocery store, like, ever. So I really try not to, just because, there's no reason. Plus, I do think that what we're doing recreationally is generally sustainable. And if we only eat the fish that we catch, like, there will still be fish for the future. But a lot of the commercial fishing is not really sustainable for some specific species more than others, of course. But so I pretty much never buy fish.
Do you ever worry about eating too much tuna, like the whole mercury or any of that stuff?
Yeah, that's the one downside. I'd like to get into hunting and take a deer, because it's like you can eat deer, elk, or something like that every single day and be fine. And you can't do that with tuna. Like there's been a number of people in the community that I've read about on the forums that have had issues and gone to the doctor, and they're like, look, your mercury levels are off the charts. So that's another thing, is you can't eat tuna every day. Like how much tuna can you really eat? And if you're on a good 2-day trip, let's say like the trip I went on the Aztec last year, the 2-day trip, I had full 2-day limits of yellowfin and 2-day limits of bluefin. So it's like 4 bluefin and 10 yellowfin. The bluefin for 40 to 50 pounds. Yellowfin were like 20 pounds, and that is so much meat. It's really more than anyone can eat. So, luckily I've got a huge family, and then I also have people that I used to work with that I'll give whole fish to. They're generally like Mexican families, because they appreciate like the whole fish. I remember I gave this guy I worked with like fillets once, and he goes, "Oh, thank you, but next time can I have whole fish?" And I was like, "All right." Like they're like the opposite. I feel like, I don't want to sound racist, but it's like white people are a little snooty sometimes. They're like, oh, give me the filet skinned. Like, I don't want to deal with it. And then sometimes other people, specifically like the Mexican community in San Diego, like they're so stoked on the whole fish. So just look for people like that and have them like have their numbers ready to go. Because whenever I come home for a trip, there's like a group of people I give a call and they'll drop off whole fish too.
I think you're 100% right though, and about the whole fish movement, because it's just education. Like I know people who use everything, eyeballs, they turn it into like fish cakes or like fish fries. There's use the bones for a fish stock, and they keep gallons of fish stock in the freezer. Like all these different little tips and tricks, but most people just they're not aware of it. And that's where it kind of, I think there just needs to be more content that kind of shows people all the time. Like here, this is what you can do. Try this. You get a tuna, great. Try 15 different methods, and you'll explore your culinary palate and stuff.
Yeah, actually, there's a place called the Faroe Islands, and they're part of Denmark. They're way off the coast, kind of by Iceland, like way up there north in the Atlantic. And they're kind of famous because they're one of the only like first world countries that still practices whaling. But it's like a tradition. They kill some whales every year and they eat them on the islands. But they have a Michelin star restaurant on the islands, and I was there with my girlfriend. It was really expensive, and we were debating if we should go or not, but we ended up doing it. So we went to this dinner, and it's like they specialize in the seafood there, and part of their deal was like, look, we're trying to use every part of the fish and be less wasteful. So they made these crackers out of fish skin. They used like 50 layers of fish skin they pressed together. They made like this foam out of the cod liver oil, which honestly I thought was disgusting, but like good for them for making something edible out of it, I guess. But yeah, like you said, there are ways to use different parts that a lot of people don't do.
Fish skin, man. Frying fish skin is the new chicharrones. My girl, she does a lot of she has like a snack blog, but in Asia they have fish skin chips. So it's becoming a little bit more popular. So it's pretty interesting to see all the different kind of things you can do with the whole fish.
Yeah, it's really good.
Regarding your boats, man, do you have any recommended 2-day, 1-day, 2-day kind of boats that you like the best? You can piss off at some people.
No, I mean, it's always a hot topic. And honestly, I feel like boats are like wine or beer or something where it's like everybody has one they love and swear by, and then they have one they'll never drink, and then other people love that one. And I really like Seaforth Landing because it's closer to North County. There's a bunch of free parking, and I like getting on boats there. I like Seaforth more than I like Fisherman's or Point Loma or H&M. Not saying other ones are bad. I've had great trips out of the other landings too, but if I'm in San Diego, I pretty much go out of Seaforth. Mission Bay is just, yeah, it's closer and the parking's way better off. Then it comes down to personal preference. Like I'll ride the Pride whenever I can because I'm buddies with Jason, who's the captain and owner. The Aztec's good. I like fishing with Greg. The Pacific Voyager is absolutely my favorite, but it's just hard to get on because they don't do open party trips, so you have to be on a charter. But yeah, I remember I went on Bloody Decks. Talk about the drama. People love roasting boats when they have a bad trip on Bloody Decks. So one guy went on the Constitution and had just like the worst trip ever, and he just was tearing up the captain and this and that. And I had booked a 4-day coming up on the Constitution, and I was like a little nervous, like, dude, like, am I gonna have a shitty? Does this boat suck? And I went on the boat and I had the greatest time and the greatest trip. So yeah, take anything you hear with a grain of salt. Try them yourself. I will say the San Diego boats, and to a certain extent, you get what you pay for. And the San Diego boats are a little more expensive than the LA boats. But in general, to me, like they seem a little bit nicer. Like if you ride a budget boat, you kind of get a budget experience. When I started out and I was, in my like early 20s and broke, like I would ride those boats because that's what I could afford. But you get, the more you pay, you get a slightly better experience generally.
Yeah, that's funny to me. It's like fishing it's not a guarantee. Anytime you go on a trip, it's like, it's a nice if you catch a thing, if anything, right? It's like, it's fishing. It's not just like, put fish in the bag. So it's funny if somebody roasts somebody. It's like, their whole incentive is to get you on fish. So it's not like they didn't try.
Dude, and everyone always comes in and it's like, yeah, I'm sure that captain wanted to drive around burning gas and losing money to not get his crew tipped. Like, of course they're trying to do their best. But yeah, I'm sure there'll be some this summer. Like every year it happens on Bloody Decks, someone will have a bad trip. And if you ever do have a bad trip too, what everyone says is like, go talk to the captain about it and be like, look, like I had a bad experience and this is why. Like your crew wasn't good, or I thought they treated me poorly here, or like handle it with the captain and don't go, to the internet to whine about it because you'll get tore up online and it doesn't do you any good.
I think it comes down to being like a man or a woman, you know. It's like you say it to the face instead of saying it behind their back. And otherwise, that's why it's hard to take a lot of stuff online too serious or too personal, because I'm like, it's just a place for people to vent, you know, most of the time. It's like, if they can't say it to your face, then does it really matter? Like,
yeah.
Regarding, I want to be cognizant of your time, man. So do you have any recommendations for us newbie fishermen on like books, podcasts, anything like that outside of California Fishing News?
I mean, I think what you're doing is super cool. Get on the forums and just post some questions. Be humble. Lose your ego, and people are usually very generous and to help out. If you're in San Diego, get on SD Fish. Get on Bloody Decks, even though it's a shit show. Like, I got multiple rides on boats. There's a forum that's like private boater trip planning, both inshore and offshore. So if a guy's going out offshore and he's got a boat and he wants 3 people to split cast, he posts it up if he doesn't have buddies to go. And I rode with this one guy a couple of trips, and he was a great guy. Some of his crew was a great guy, and I met some cool people through that. And then, yeah, I mean, check out California Fishing News, or join a club too. Like, there's the Balboa Angling Club, there's Oceanside Anglers, there's a ton of angling clubs. So, and a lot of those clubs they skew old. Like, it's 50-year-old men and up generally that are in these fishing clubs, and they need young people to come in and kind of take over the reins in the future, because those guys are just getting older. So it can make a big difference, I think. And they're helpful. Like, a lot of those old guys have boats and they're retired or have extra money or don't mind. And if you're young and willing to work hard and show up early and do your thing, they'll be more than generous with sharing information and rides with you. So
I 100% agree with you. I think they're always looking for, and there's no better feeling than teaching a lot of times. And it's like, these guys have accumulated so much knowledge, and I think you can see that from a lot of the stuff that I do with Coach. It's just like, I'm just trying to pull out the knowledge that these guys might never be able to share outside of like a one-to-one kind of thing. So it's like, there are a lot of them. They're all there. Everything you're saying is 100% true. It's like, just go get a mentor, get a couple of mentors, get 10 of them.
Yeah. And I've got free gear I worked at this restaurant in Encinitas, and I was wearing my C4 sport fishing hat in there one time, and these 2 guys were sitting at the bar, and he was like, "Oh, you like to fish?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, dude, I'm obsessed." And this is a guy who, he used to be like me. Like, in his 20s, he was obsessed and he used to fish all the time. And now he's like an older lawyer and he's loaded, but he doesn't even fish anymore. But he ended up giving me my Avid reel. He gave me a few rods. He let me take out his boat. Like, it can, if you're nice and cool, yeah, people will give you some really cool opportunities. So don't be shy. When I went to Sonoma State, I didn't know anyone who fished up there, and I saw this guy like loading up his boat. It was like this sweet aluminum offshore boat, and I just pulled over my car and I got out and I was like, "Hey man, like, I just like to fish. I was wondering what are you targeting? I didn't even know what he'd be fishing for up there this time of year." And he was like, "Oh, I'm fishing for salmon, blah blah blah." And he's like, "Let me get your number. Maybe I'll take you out." And he ended up taking me out twice. He was a super super cool dude, and yeah, I caught my first lingcod with him. We went crabbing. I got full limits to Dungeness crab up there. He took me salmon fishing, and we didn't catch shit, and I just threw up over the side of the boat. But the next time he hit me up, he's like, "Hey, dude, I have a patch for you. Like, come over early so I can give you the seasickness thing." So yeah, just go out of your way and introduce yourself. Be nice when you can.
Awesome. All right, I like to ask one last question at the end of everything, and it's, why do you fish?
Dude, I don't know. It's what I do. I love it. It's, I'm not like the most religious person, but I think nature is, kind of like the church for a lot of people, and myself included. And I love fishing. It's like a puzzle game sometimes you're trying to play. It gets you outside. I love it. I love the community. And when I've got my best friends I've known forever, and then I have like my best fishing friends. And when it comes down to it, like, I end up talking to my best fishing friends almost more than my other ones, because we share that something that we do all the time. So I don't know. I just love it. But obviously it's not for everyone, because my dad took all 3 of my older brothers fishing growing up too, and it didn't stick with them. So maybe it's like evolutionary. Like, some people were meant to be farmers, some people were meant to be hunters or fishermen, some people are meant to build stuff, and I think I was maybe meant to be a fisherman. Awesome. So how can everybody find you if they want to connect? My name's Ernie Gorham, Gorham. You can look at my Instagram, but I would recommend you looking at California Fishing News. I've got an Instagram, I've got a Facebook. You can go to California, it's cafishingnews.com is the website. And then California Fishing News on YouTube and on any of your podcast apps, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Subscribe, check it out. Let me know what you guys think. And it's a work in progress. So if anyone has got ideas, or if you have a catch, or if anything, got any questions, feel free to hit me up. I'm more than happy to help.
All right. I'll put all your links into the description at the bottom of this and on the podcast show notes. Thanks, Ernie. Much appreciated, man.
Yeah, thank you, dude. It's been cool.
Well, that does it for this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Big thank you to Ernie for sharing all your wisdom, and I look forward to fishing with you soon, especially doing some spearfishing locally. And all you out there who have been listening to this podcast episode, if you have any recommendations on what you want to hear in future episodes, please let me know. Shoot me an email at jon@castandspear.com. And until next time, stay safe in the water. Tight lines.